I don't know what's going on, but I'm in. You know, like whatever you do, whatever you want to my eyes right now. It's fine. Like it's cool. I like all this.
Welcome in, everybody, to another Hometown Ghost Stories horror movie review, where I am your host, Rob Coakley, joined as always by Dave Wilkins.
Hello, Rob Coakley.
Hello, Dave Wilkins, and joined, of course, by Jesse Wilkins.
What's going on, gentlemen?
And we watched Late Night with the Devil, which you can watch right now on Shudder. We have some thoughts. We have some opinions. We have some scores at the end of this episode. But the first thing that we always start with, the number one thing, is Dave's synopsis of the movie.
Yes. Late Night with the Devil, written and directed by Cameron and Colin Cairns. In 1977, late night talk show host Jack Delroy attempts to jumpstart his declining ratings by bringing on parapsychologist and her possessed patient. What starts out as a success quickly takes a turn for the worse, unleashing an unspeakable evil into the nation's living rooms. So this movie was definitely outside the box, and it kind of had to be, because possession movies are a dime a dozen, and they're almost always the same old tired story with the same old tropes. Not the case with this movie. This movie was very different, and just to pick one positive thing I liked about it, so I don't steamroll the whole movie on you guys. I love the way this movie was shot. I felt like I was watching something that was actually from that era, the 1970s. I loved the way they used the grainy filters to get that feel, and the 4:3 aspect ratio shots that gave that kind of that square screen from that era. I thought it was really unique, kind of give it almost like a Tarantino vibe. Tarantino tries to do that sometimes in his movies. And this movie you really felt like you were in that time frame. I thought this movie was pretty well done.
Not even just that, but the color palette as well on the movie, right?
Mhm.
Really felt like old 70s footage. So you mix all that together, and I do think they knocked that out the park pretty well.
Yeah, the music, obviously, all of the cut scenes, your graphics that were on the scene, the band, the look of everyone, also just the antics on stage, lighting up a cigar on stage or a cigarette or whatever, the whiskey in between shots. I mean, like, this is all stuff that doesn't really happen on TV as much anymore. Outside of like stand-up comedy, you'll still see someone who might light up a smoke on stage, but it was just it was so good the way that they shot this movie, and that they really made you feel like you were watching footage from the late 70s.
Yeah, they did a few different things that I liked too. Like when you'd have it in color when they were live, and then when they'd cut to a commercial and everything that you got behind the scenes was all black and white. So it was kind of an interesting way to distinguish those two different aspects of the movie.
Yeah, I think that they did a lot of different things in this movie. I think the main point, Dave, that I had was how different it felt as a possession movie. Just to tag on with that, there's so many of them. There's so many of them, and it's not even a problem that there's so many of them. It's legitimately, we can tell you how it's going to start, what's going to happen in the middle, how they're going to end it. It's just the same movie. It's like, well, you know what's different about this movie? It's actually set in a classroom instead of a bedroom, or like they just try to change the setting and just do the same movie over and over and over again. Exorcism movies, like every exorcism movie tries to be The Exorcist, just like, but our twist is it's in this place. Possession movies, same idea for the most part. They found a different formula with this, and I think anytime we get these different formula movies, it's so refreshing, right? Like, so that is my number one like takeaway that I loved in this movie. What I want to jump into next is, you get this great premise, you found the perfect cast for it. I can't tell you one person. I mean, maybe you guys feel differently, but I thought the entire cast was perfect for this for this movie. And David, God, I can never say his last name.
I didn't even try.
Because he's in a lot. So David
He's in a lot of-
Dashmalin or something. I can't
Something like that. He's in a lot of DC movies, right?
He's in a lot of DC movies. He's sort of a character actor in a lot of stuff. I've never really seen him lead a movie, and I never pictured him as a leading role type of guy. And God, does he just crush his part? Like he nailed this part. I was very skeptical going into it because of how much I do like him. So this was something a little different. Like he had to carry a movie for the most part. And I thought he was great. Did you guys have any issues with any acting in this movie?
No, I
it's
liked
fantastic. Yeah.
I liked I guess I could kind of say maybe the guy who played Christu was a little bit wonky, but he was also supposed to be.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I couldn't tell if he was like either overacting or just not believable or was doing a perfect job in that role, because that kind of was the character that he was portraying.
Yeah. And it was like they marched him out on stage to be that kind of goofy thing. Because
Mm-hmm.
when this whole thing started, and by the way, before we go any further, we will say this is a newer movie
Mhm.
and we are going to spoil it. So if you haven't watched it yet, feel free to stop this and go watch the movie, then come back. Unless you want it spoiled, we're going to go ahead and spoil it. Also, while I have you, make sure you hit like and subscribe and send me all your pets in the mail and that kind of stuff.
Every pet.
Just anything you got. I'll eat anything. I'll eat anything. I don't even remember what I was saying. With that being said, yeah, it was supposed to be like an over the top thing. It was supposed to be like a goofy Halloween special with the twist at the end. So they didn't really march him out, I felt like, expecting to have anything profound happen. And they did a good job of joking, as a late night talk host would be joking along with the situation that's happening, especially when he was getting a bunch of swings and misses along the line with trying to make a connection in the room.
Mm-hmm. Just to go back to the main character there, the guy who played Jack. And he was not only did a really good job acting, he was a really well-written, well-developed character. This movie only had a 90-minute runtime, and you get this guy, you kind of get him, right? He's almost this tragic hero who he wants the number one spot for that number one talk show, and he's willing to do anything for it. I think the whole allegory for this movie is he sold his soul to the devil for fame. And you kind of see both sides of him. He's this perfect kind of TV host on screen, and then when he's off screen, you kind of see almost like an arrogant dark side to him, which I thought was really. He's a very interesting character, and it's hard to develop characters in a movie that only has a 90-minute runtime.
While still being sympathetic throughout the whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. So you're hitting on all that stuff. You're still sympathetic towards what's going on with him. Yeah, he's very well developed. It just performance is delivered perfectly, and they didn't force anything down your throat with the backstory either. Like, you kind of had to make the connection, not for yourself. They tell you a little bit, but they didn't have to do an exposition dump to tell you everything.
But they did a perfect job of sprinkling it in, which is basically he's part of this Bohemian Grove cult situation with the high-powered politicians and stuff. And it worked perfectly with the way that the movie turned out, because you see that in the beginning and you kind of forget about it because so many other things are happening in that movie. Right. I completely forgot that he had this little tie-in. And then when you get towards the end of the movie, it completely works its way back in with all sorts, because you can kind of, it is still an exorcism movie. It still had a little bit of the tropes that exorcism movies do have, with the distorted voice, where you have the deeper voice with when the exorcism is happening, the cuts on the face, you got that typical look, the vomiting that was happening, not with her, but with the other, the other character there. And you had a few of the tropes, levitation, whatever. And then the ultimate ending, which you may have guessed how this movie completely ends, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But there's no way anybody in the history of people who have watched movies would guess how they approached the ending of this movie, with all of the characters and all of the owls and all this crazy shit that happened at the end of the movie, where I'm watching it, where little spoiler on how my score is going to be. I love this movie from start to finish. And even when that was happening, I'm like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm in. You know, like, do whatever you want to my eyes right now. It's fine. Like, it's cool. I like all this. So,
well, just quick point on some of the tropes that they did hit on, which they did hit a lot of the typical exorcism tropes, but they kind of put their own spin on some of them too. Like it wasn't like crazy green puke. It was a weird black tarry puke, right? That's, I mean, a slight distinction. But then when you take Christou's character, who his eyes do the tropey roll back in his head, like a possessed person would do, they did this so different and it creeped me out. They had one eye roll all the way back and the other one follow right after. I was like, I've never seen that.
Yeah.
That's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That was a super unsettling scene. And it's where they took that typical trope and they made it their own. I mean, maybe that's been done before, but I don't think I've seen it like that.
No, that was unique, and it almost was like his body was trying to fight it off because,
Yeah.
unlike other possessions, he knew what was going on. He saw it coming, and wow, the twist that this movie took was nuts. And I loved the skeptic guy that they had on stage, and I liked the way that they built him up, where he came out and he was like a former illusionist kind of guy, where he's doing the kind of like a Chris Angel type almost, where, you know, he does the illusions on stage, but he knows that it's all just a trick.
Mhm.
So his thing out there, they were really hitting on that, right? Where, I mean, obviously there's been plenty of debunkers over time. Like I think they were trying to peg him as the guy who was trying to debunk the Warrens, and they worked that into the movie as well. But you've had plenty of these people at the time, but really it was like Chris Angel. And this, one of my favorite clips to go back and watch was Chris Angel on this show. It was like a reality show where they brought psychics on stage, and Chris Angel was supposed to be one of the judges. And I mean, obviously Chris Angel's a bit of a tool, but he's on stage dressed like a 13-year-old goth kid, whatever. But he's sitting there and he watches this guy's performance, and his performance was crazy. His performance was really convincing, and the crowd's going nuts. And he had this big thing where he's communicating with a spirit and predicting what could be in this locked box or whatever. Chris Angel didn't even debunk what happened on stage, but he just flat out, he's like, I'm an illusionist, you're an illusionist, you're a con artist, and here is a check, $500,000 or $1 million of my own money I will sign to you if you can tell me what's written on in this envelope or whatever. And to that guy's point, I mean, whether or not he was a real psychic, like, he's like, that's not how it works, and, you know, you're just pompous asshole or whatever. Good, cool clip. We'll just go, you know, YouTube it. It's still out there. It's Chris Angel debunks whatever, or goes after this guy. He basically loses his shit. But it reminded me.
Don't give Chris Angel too much credit. Houdini used to do the same thing.
Right, and that's where Chris Angel was getting it.
Yeah,
I did lead it off by saying Chris Angel's a bit of a tool, right?
Yeah.
Please go on.
But this was a big thing in the 70s.
Please go on the show, Chris Angel.
This was a big thing in the 70s during the Satanic Panic, as a lot of these talk shows, they'd have the skeptics and they'd have the mediums and the parapsychologists on. They just argue on stage. You see it a lot with Ed and Lorraine Warren. They would always be on these shows, and they'd have their naysayers on also. So there was a lot of throwbacks to the 70s with that aspect, and that was just another thing that I thought this movie did really well.
Who was the debunker from the Amityville case?
His name escapes me at the moment. I wish you didn't ask me,
because this struck me. I actually was wondering. I was like, is that the name that they used?
No, his name wasn't, but I think he might have been loosely based on it. But that guy wasn't the only one at the time either. There were a lot of those types of guys.
Right, and there's still a lot of those types of people. There's entire websites and podcasts dedicated to just debunking the stuff that we do our show on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he's also the perfect kind of overconfident skeptic that I can't stand.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Where he just knows everything. Right.
Okay, but there was a great scene in this movie that was also another super unique scene in this movie, and he's like, "All right, I'm going to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that what you just saw on stage was faked." And he goes and he has the assistant come up and he hypnotizes him, and he also hypnotizes the camera, so everyone at home, and he hypnotizes everybody in the audience by doing it right on the studio camera, and everyone kind of has this moment of like mass illusion, right, where they're all, or mass hypnosis, where they all think they see the same thing, and everyone loses their mind, and then they go back and watch the studio tape and they see that it didn't happen the way they thought it did. So I thought that was a really, really brilliant scene.
Quick question, and I want you guys to be completely honest. When you were watching that part of the movie, were you like, I don't know if it's gonna get me? Because I was doing that. I'm like, I'm gonna look away for a little bit. You're not gonna get me. You're not gonna get me, TV man.
That's funny.
Don't lie to me. I don't answer the fucking question.
The thought crossed my mind, but I didn't look away.
I know.
Look
You're
away.
the tough guy. Rob, what about you?
I was hoping I got hypnotized and didn't have to, think about anything ever again, basically.
All right. Can we get a wellness check on Rob? What the fuck was that?
I don't know. I couldn't think of anything funny at the moment. I was still thinking about the scene because I actually have a small problem with this scene.
Rob's about to wheel his wheelchair off the balcony of that hotel we just covered. Aye.
I like that scene a lot. There's a small, minute detail that I wish that they implemented in it. So he's trying to debunk what had just happened, right? Like that's his whole point is he can hypnotize the majority of the crowd.
Mhm.
But when they're asking the audience if everyone saw it, there's people in the crowd that didn't see what everybody else saw.
Right.
And I thought they should have made that more of a point that everybody saw the possession
Wait.
Well, they did bring
They
that up
did.
when they started reviewing the footage after. But they should-
afterwards.
I would have brought it up right away.
That's my point. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Like, I think it should have been brought
his
up right
whole
away.
thing was that she had somehow hypnotized the whole crowd as well. But when did that happen? Because that was a little bit of a weak argument. But have you ever been to a hypnotist show? Either of you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I actually got brought up on stage once, but
They
he
could
sent me
get-
away because he was.
there's no way it could have got you. Yeah.
Yeah, because they do that. He did like the preliminary test where you
Mm-hmm.
try to like see if you can sway your balance, and then anybody who he couldn't sway their balance, he's just like, get off stage, you're not hypnotizable. So
Yeah. If you're too
it actually stayed on stage, and I had to be sent off.
yeah, if you're too much of like hard headed, like you're not going to get me, buddy. Like they're not going to get you. That's not the type of people that they can hypnotize. So I had no problems with that scene, but immediately I was poking holes in his argument. I'm like, well, no, this didn't happen and that didn't happen. Roll the tape back. Let's see what actually happened on the
Yeah.
tape. And that's exactly what they did in the movie. So glad they did.
I mean, it's a small nitpick. It's just I would have just had the host bring that up as a point is all I would do. Like, and then we would roll the tape back and prove that point, right? So,
But that is what happened.
but he doesn't say it,
He does. He said, let's roll the tape back of the possession.
right? But he doesn't bring up the point that everyone saw this, but not everyone saw the hypnotized guy. Like it's a quick one line to throw in there. And I think that's how you should have led into reviewing the tape.
Well, no, because once they rolled back the tape and the tape showed the exorcism, he was like, well, this is just he started to immediately go to these are tricks that they're pulling on stage and this is pre-planned. And he started saying that there must be some sort of system with the chair to levitate. And he immediately went off that argument,
Right.
abandoned that, and immediately went to this is all a setup and everyone's in on it.
Right.
So and this was his thing. He's not going to write that $500,000. He's not going to sign that $500,000 check because he's always got an answer. He's like, and then he also said this in that he's like, I'm going to have my experts analyze the tape to see what kind of trickery you guys pulled. Cause he didn't believe the tape at that point. So he was sticking to his guns. He was the skeptic. And I had no issues with those scenes.
Yeah, didn't stick to his guns too much longer after that, though.
Should have brought some guns. That man
Shit-
was in trouble.
Shit got a little wild after that particular point. The girl, what was her name? Lily?
Crushed it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So eerie when she kept staring into the camera.
That was
I'm like,
Scariest
I'm
part
like-
of the whole movie.
I'm going to look away. You're not going to get me, TV woman. Like
That was the creepiest part of the whole movie when she's just staring at the camera. You're just like, man, they found a great actress for this
100%.
part because her stare is scarier than anything that comes afterwards, and the whole movie's good, but that stare, man, like I was just like, oh, I had the I was getting the goose flesh.
The goose flashes they say. What'd you guys think of the ending of this movie?
It was chaotic, but I was all in. This was so cool. The way that they did like the effects with the head splitting open. Like this is everything about this movie was so different and so good. So like exorcism movies and a lot of horror movies, they struggle to end. They do. So it's either complete chaos, which makes no sense. And you're like, oh, guess that's what's happening.
Yeah.
You have some of the best endings, which are usually the bad guy wins endings.
Mhm.
And then you have an exorcism ending. This was a chaos ending that works.
Mhm.
And you rarely get the chaos endings that work.
Right.
You rarely
What's the trope ending? Like, what's the tropey ending for every Exorcist movie, right? They have the big exorcism, the priest comes in, the power of Christ compels you, the demon's banished, priest saved the day, or whoever, the Warrens saved the day. And that's the end of the movie. It's the end of almost every single one. And so rarely do you get a movie like this where the ending is not what you would expect. This was not what I was expecting. The
No.
way that way this ended. I don't think they stuck the landing the way I would have liked for them to do.
as soon as, and again, we're spoiling this, as soon as it was his wife convincing him to stab her, I knew that he was going to come out of it and he was going to be stabbing somebody.
Mhm.
And since everybody else was dead, I was like, he's probably sacrificing the girl. And that is what happened. But I didn't care. I was like, I'm all in. This is great. I'm not
Yeah.
every second of it. So, but as soon as like they got their sacrificial daggers next to the hospital bed, I'm like, well, that means he's sacrificing someone and he's hypnotized right now. But I don't know if everybody saw that coming. But everything else that led up to that ending, I'm like, oh, the fuck's going on?
Yeah,
This is cool.
I liked the chaos of it. I liked like the electric where that was super unique. Never seen anything like that before. Some of the CGI was a little corny. That's one of my negatives on this movie. But
But it was kind of supposed to be, right? I mean,
I don't know if it was. I think that so like I didn't like the bad CGI on the puke scene way in the beginning, and I didn't love the CGI of the electricity. Some of the bugs CGI was kind of wonky. Kind of felt almost like
you're talking about the
80s.
worms.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
felt
with like
almost
the big worms. Yeah. So some of it was a little goofy, but I feel like they were trying to get that late 70s, early 80s. They were mixing in a little bit of it. And I didn't really have a problem with it because that's kind of what was available at the time. You know, obviously this movie was not shot in the 1970s, but it kind of brought a little nostalgia back to like 70s movies. Like this is what you would be afraid of. And you got to remember that this is all kind of a dream thing, is these big goofy worms. I don't know. Because the regular worms, when he was pulling them out of his neck and his stomach, those look great. Those just were probably worms, right? But
right. So, but my problem with it doesn't quite fit with this movie, because this movie wanted to make us, the viewer, feel like we were watching a live broadcast from the 70s, not like we were watching a 70s horror movie. That's the difference. So
yeah.
what we should have been seeing was good CGI or good practical effects, because we're supposed to believe that we're watching a real live broadcast, not that we're watching a 70s horror movie. Right. That's why I felt like it didn't quite fit.
It felt like what they might have been doing with the electricity scenes is not necessarily special effects from the 70s, like I just said 18 seconds ago, but maybe it was how the cameras from the 70s would have captured this. And maybe that's how it would have looked on those cameras.
I have no idea what that would look like on those cameras, because that's something that's never happened.
Wait,
But,
you mean this wasn't a true story? You've ruined it for me. Shit.
Rob, what are your thoughts on the end of this movie?
So this is I like it. So I like the end of the movie, but I also have to dock points for a few things that happen at the end of the movie. This is supposed to be, you know, sort of a found footage type movie where we're supposed to be watching a movie that actually happened, you know, akin to Blair Witch and all those other found footage, Hell House LLC. And I watched The Outwaters, right, like a year or so ago, and my big problem with that movie was, well, it's not actually found footage because you're showing on camera the actual delusions of this person. Like I'm seeing their delusions, and we're seeing his delusions at the end. We're seeing Jack Delroy's delusions at the end of the movie, and that's not what the type of movie is. This is a found footage movie. We're supposed to actually be seeing what's going on. So I have a bit of a problem with that. I have a bit of a problem with some of the backstage stuff as well.
Before we move off of the found footage thing, so this movie is slightly different from a traditional found footage movie. I think you got shots from the parts that were supposed to be found footage. That was your 4:3 aspect ratio shots, and then you had your black and white shots were from a different perspective of the off-screen stuff. Could have still been found footage, but then they had listen.
You're right. It was back and forth from found footage to
what was actually happening, and then you had a whole different one where you had the widescreen color perspective, which was from the lead character's point of view from the beginning of the movie. So they from the beginning of the movie they established the rules. This is found footage. Okay. So I don't think they did stray too far away. That said, I didn't like the fever dream sequence at the end. I thought it was like, what is this? Where is this coming from? Where's it going? It was confusing. I don't like dream sequences too much in horror movies. You see it more in supernatural thrillers, because I feel like the writers and directors can just get away with whatever they want, and they don't have to be honest with their audience. And it always kind of annoys me.
All right. Well, I guess that makes sense now that you point that out, the rules being established a little bit better in the beginning, but I don't think I like jumping between found footage and other stuff, because I think you're making the movie. I just think it should be one or the other. I guess maybe I'm too small brain for
maybe
it.
I kind of like the way they mixed it in, but I do think they established it really, really early in the movie where you had the found footage stuff, like Dave said, with the square screen. Excuse me. It wasn't even necessarily the camera angles that made it obvious. It was clearly after they showed what was happening on the TV show. When they cut away, when it went to black and white, it went to widescreen. It was very obvious that this was just what was happening off screen. So if it was just the found footage, it would have just been what would have been recorded and aired for television. So I had no problem with it.
Did this feel like the best VHS segment you guys have ever seen in your life? As I was watching this, I'm like, this is like an entire movie of what would ever be the best VHS snippet ever. Like that's
what do you mean
just,
from like the VHS 99 type movies? Yeah.
From the anthology series.
100%.
Yeah, that's a good call.
That's it's like, for some reason I just kept going back to that as I'm watching. I'm like, this feels like a segment from VHS extended, but I love it. Like I think it would be the best. That just was the vibes I was kind of getting a little bit from.
There are a few segments from VHS which I wish they would make feature length films.
Sure, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I want that. I love the short stories, and I hate when they stretch out short. I hate when they stretch out short stories into long stories, because then it just feels like they're just packing stuff in there that doesn't belong.
Comedy horror movie, the one from, I can't remember which VHS it was. The two guys who end up going to hell. They were hilarious, and I want a full-length comedy horror movie about that, because that was the best. That was the best one of all time.
I stand corrected.
that was a pretty good one. There's a few that I would be fine. Some you can't. So one of my favorites is, we don't have to make this a whole VHS thing, but the head camera of the guy that turns into the zombie.
That's my favorite out of the whole series.
I love that one, but you can never do a full-length movie on it. Right?
No, it'd be stupid.
But for a short segment, it was great. But so that was just the vibes I was getting from this movie too. This VHS movie. So
you nailed it on the head with that. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
Do we want to get some closing thoughts and some scores?
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I'll start. This movie had me on the edge of my seat. I thought they did an amazing job building tension throughout the movie. A lot of people describe this as a slow burn. I don't agree at all. This was a movie where I'm looking at the clock being like, oh man, I hope there's still a lot of time left, because I'm really enjoying this movie.
Yeah.
And I almost never text you guys to tell you what I'm thinking about a movie that we're reviewing, because we want it to be authentic on the show. But I remember Jesse and I were texting, being like, this is fucking awesome. So this movie had me on the absolute edge of my seat for the whole thing. I wish they stuck the landing a little better. I wish they didn't go kind of wonky fever dream. But to be honest, like I liked the chaos ending. I liked the unpredictability of what ended up happening. And for me, I'm going 4.7.
Oh wow, that's a good one, Jesse.
Yeah, I'm high on it as well. This was one where I enjoyed it from start to finish. So a lot of times with these horror movies, and we've watched a lot of shitty ones lately, so I'll put it on and be doing something else, some little graphic design or something. I'm like, all right, I'll get some work done and throw this movie on. And I think I got about 7 minutes into the movie. I'm like, fucking A, man. All right, rewind the movie, start over, full attention. I was like, this is going to be good. And I had assumed it was. I saw nothing but glowing reviews, people always posting about it, which I hate, because I'm like, oh, let me skip over this until I see the movie. I don't want to spoil it for myself. This movie was tense. It had you on the, like Dave said, on the edge of your seat the entire movie. Love the way it was shot. Love the music in this movie. Love these stupid effects in this movie. Love the chaos that happened. I love the ties to the Bohemian Grove mystery cult. That everything about this movie, I absolutely enjoyed. It's a 4.9 for me. I really, really, really wanted to give it a 5, but the fever dream stuff at the end, while I enjoyed it, I was like, this is goofy. That guy's going on an owl suit. While I enjoyed it, it was a little too much, but it was fine with the way that it ended. And it really left you wondering, like, what kind of chaos could this thing be unleashing on the world right now with all the people that it's hypnotized or whatever. It just insane stuff. A crazy good movie. Go watch it.
So I'm gonna echo the time thing, where this movie just went by in like the snap of like a drop of a hat. It went so quick I couldn't even think of a sentence for it. Right?
We all just started snapping our hats. We're like,
yeah, we were just like, just gonna spit in the dark real quick and
hat your fingers.
Yeah. So it went so fast, and I loved the majority of the movie. That said, it's the best horror movie of 2024 so far. Yeah. There's nothing. I mean,
did you factor in Night Swim?
Oh, that's a good point. I mean, God, how could you not factor in Night Swim? But it's definitely the best movie of 2024. It's the barometer right now, where we're
Mhm.
going to judge every other horror movie we watch for the rest of the year, unless something else comes out that's a little bit better than it. You guys have such high scores. I'm going a little bit lower, but I'm still going to give it a 4.3. I think it's that good. I think you have to go watch it. And that's 4.3 split electrical heads out of 5. Just so you know.
Son of a bitch.
But I think you have to watch this movie. It's on Shudder. You can go watch it there. Make sure you tell other you can watch this one solo. You don't have to go with friends or watch it with friends, but probably be just as scary watching it with a group of people, because it is a terrifying movie and you won't regret it. Anyways, that's going to do it for this horror movie review. Make sure you rate. Let us know in the comments your score on this movie. Tell us how many split electrical heads out of 5 you would give it. Let us know on Patreon. Jump over to Patreon, sign up. We'll catch you next time. Peace.